The morning the man with the gun walked into Evelyn Oliver's classroom, she was wearing two items she had vowed during her 43-year career as a teacher never to wear: denim and rhinestones. Mrs. Oliver was a firm believer that a teacher should look like a teacher, well-groomed, blouses with collars, skirts and pantsuits crisply ironed, dress shoes polished. None of that nonsense younger teachers wore these days: miniskirts, tennis shoes, plunging necklines, tattoos, for goodness sake. For instance, Mr. Ellery, the young 8th-grade teacher, had a tattoo on his right arm, a series of bold black slashes and swoops that Mrs. Oliver recognized as Asian in origin. It means teacher in Chinese, Mr. Ellery, wearing a sleeveless T-shirt, told her after, embarrassingly, he caught her staring at his deltoid muscle one stifling hot August afternoon during in-service week, when all the teachers were preparing their classrooms for the school year. Mrs. Oliver sniffed in disapproval, but really, she couldn't help but wonder how painful it must be to have someone precisely and methodically inject ink into one's skin. Casual Fridays were the worst, with teachers, even the older ones, wearing denim and sweatshirts emblazoned with the school name and logo, the Broken Branch Consolidated School Hornets. But on this unusually bitter March day, the last day school was in session before spring break, Mrs. Oliver had on the denim jumper she now knew she was going to die while wearing. Shameful, she thought, after all these years of razor-sharp pleats and itchy support hose. Last week, after all the other third-graders had left for the day, Mrs. Oliver had tentatively opened the crumpled striped pink and yellow gift bag handed to her by Charlotte, a skinny, disheveled 8-year-old with shoulder-length, burnished black hair that chronically housed a persistent family of lice. "What's this, Charlotte?" Mrs. Oliver asked in surprise. "My birthday isn't until this summer."
"I know," Charlotte answered with a gap-toothed grin. "But my mom and me thought you'd get more use out of it if I gave it to you now."
Mrs. Oliver expected to find an apple-scented candle or homemade cookies or a hand-painted birdhouse inside, but instead pulled out a denim stone-washed jumper with rhinestones painstakingly arranged in the shape of a rainbow twinkling up at her. Charlotte looked expectantly up at Mrs. Oliver through the veil of bangs that covered her normally mischievous gray eyes.
"I'd be dazzled at myself, mostly," Charlotte explained. "My mom helped me with the rainbow." She placed a grubby finger on the colorful arch. "Roy V. Big. Red, orange, yellow, violet, blue, indigo, green. Just like you said."
Charlotte smiled brightly, showing her small, even baby teeth, still all intact. Mrs. Oliver didn't have the heart to tell Charlotte that the correct mnemonic for remembering the colors in the rainbow was Roy G. Biv, but took comfort in the fact that she at least knew all the colors of the rainbow, if not the proper order. "It's lovely, Charlotte," Mrs. Oliver said, holding the dress in front of her. "I can tell you worked hard on it."
"I did," Charlotte said solemnly. "For 2 weeks. I was going to bedazzle a birthday cake on the front, but then my mom said you might wear it more if it wasn't so holiday-ish. I almost ran out of beads. My little brother thought they were Skittles."
"I will certainly get a lot of wear out of it. Thank you, Charlotte." Mrs. Oliver reached over to pat Charlotte on the shoulder, and Charlotte immediately leaned in and wrapped her arms around Mrs. Oliver's thick middle, pressing her face into the buttons of her starched white blouse. Mrs. Oliver felt a tickle beneath her iron-gray hair and resisted the urge to scratch. It was Mrs. Oliver's husband, Cal, who had convinced her to wear the dress. "What can it hurt?" he asked just this morning when he caught her standing in front of her open closet, looking at the jumper garishly glaring right back at her. "I don't wear denim to school, and I'm certainly not going to start wearing it just before I retire," she said, not looking him in the eye, remembering how Charlotte had rushed eagerly into the classroom at the beginning of the week to see if she was wearing the dress.